Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for coming back to our most distinguished concluding panel. As you can see, we have four famous faces in front of you, four ministers, and it'll be my pleasure to introduce them to you. I'm going to go immediately down the row as they're sitting. Professor Piasakol is Minister of Public Health in Thailand, and he will speak first. Then he'll be followed by Dr. Lilibeth David, who's the Undersecretary for Health in the Philippines. Welcome, Dr. David. And then somebody who's very well known to many of our meetings, and that is our good friend Dr. Aaron Motsoaledi, who of course is the Minister of Health in South Africa. You're very welcome, Minister Motsoaledi. And then at the far end there is Professor Jane Agyemang, who's the Minister for Education in Ghana, who's been with us for much of this conference. So we're going to begin first with the Minister of Public Health in Thailand, Professor Piasakol.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to share two dimensions on the coordinated actions on UHC. First dimension, 2 points on the coordinated actions within the country. Point one is coordination of health system development. Between 1980s and 1990s, the continuous government investment in Thailand has resulted in 100% coverage of quality rural hospital and health centers that deliver quality comprehensive health services, which contributes to many outstanding achievements, including the elimination of vertical HIV transmission from mother to child. Strong collaboration between the health and education sectors has ensured adequate, committed, quality health personnel to man these facilities. Strong support from the Finance Ministry confirmed sustainable, adequate financing. Local community leaders, including religious leaders and local government units, mobilize social and financial capital to support sustainable health system development. Point two is coordinating of managing the UHC fund. Key stakeholders are members of the governing board of the Thai UHC, including representatives from 5 civil society organizations, 5 providers, 4 local government units, 8 ex-officials from relevant ministries, and 7 experts from different fields, with Minister of Public Health is a chair. The National Health Security Office also co-invests with the local government units to establish more than 6,000 community UHC funds to support community health actions, including health promotion, prevention of NCDs, long-term and end-of-life care. Second dimension, the coordinated actions at regional and global level. The attempt of the IHP Plus to expand its work to the UHC2030 is most welcome. Its governing structure should, however, be a horizontal, non-donor-driven participatory mechanism. Thailand is happy to get actively involved in its establishment and governance. We would be happy to bring the ASEAN Plus 3 UHC networks and Thailand-Japan collaboration to support UHC. Furthermore, I would like to propose the establishment of a global fund on UHC. managed by the horizontal governing structure of the UHC 2030 with lean secretariat. The spirit of Paris Declaration and aid effectiveness must be the governing concept. The fund should be small and not used to support infrastructures or pay for medicines and suppliers, which should be based on domestic resources. The fund should focus on supporting the sustainable local capacity building on knowledge generation, management, communication to strengthen evidence-informed decision on UHC. It should include the capacity building to manage the health systems and UHC fund through strategic financing and purchasing. Thailand values South cooperation and peer learning across countries, and would like to see them as the main mechanism of the new UHC 2030. Lessons learned from the past convince us that country-led, country-owned movements with good context-specific technical advisors, qualified technical experts, would be the best way. Thailand's progressive realization of UHC has demonstrated a country-led, country-owned movement with adequate local capacity to design and implement UHC. We decided against some irrelevant advices by external experts, as they do not fit with our context. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we need strong collective action to achieve UHC 2030. To prevent failure in our collective actions, we should consider implementing a set of teaching of the Lord Buddha, which is called Aparihaniyatham. It includes regular meetings, attended and adjourned punctually by all partners, serious implementation of the agreed actions, respect seniority, history, elderlies, and vulnerable groups. We should build collective trust through reducing our self-interest to the minimum and put public interest at the top priority. So, Thailand commits to fully support UHC 2030. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Oh, good afternoon. The Philippines recently came out with a long-term vision. Coincidentally, it's also called Ambition 2040. It aspires that by 2040, across actually 4 medium-term plans, to become an upper middle-income country with reduced poverty level, particularly in geographically isolated areas and conflict-affected areas in our country. The Philippines is committed to universal health coverage as one of the main drivers to a Philippines without poverty. As the health system is strengthened to become responsive to people's needs, including the need for access to quality healthcare services without the risk of financial hardship. Health system strengthening for realizing universal health coverage 2030, however, requires concerted action towards building and strengthening one responsive health system, in our case, one health system for more than 100 million Filipinos, 80 provinces, and 1,500 municipalities in a devolved health system. Partners that pour in assistance for strengthening health systems for one municipality or for one vertical program tend to passionately digress in overdesign. Such overdesign fails the test of scaling up to a nationwide system, since its overdesign seems to burden a health system that has to respond to 100 other health programs and thousands more of municipalities. Thus, any support for health system strengthening must thus look at supporting it for a whole country health system approach and resist the temptation of doing it only for their program of interest or locality of concern. When we look at all the things shared these past 2 days, we do need to transform the way we work on health system strengthening at this day and stage of so much development in health sectors. The pursuit of UHC 2030 is much bigger, with more goodwill and money available for it, and certainly with more expectations and more possibilities, as we've seen in all the things shared in these 2 days. It is also broader, as we need to work with multiple players and sectors outside of health, whether it be to engage Congress with more forceful, permanent, and more uncontrovertible legislative policies, or with the Department of Finance for more money for UHC, and for financial disincentives or taxes to reduce behaviors unfavorable to health, with the sin tax earmarked for universal health care as the best example of how this intersectoral work for UHC has allowed our country to have 100% coverage of the poor in our social health insurance. Because of our work for UHC 2030 is bigger and inevitably broader, we need to transform health systems that can correct the fragmentation and power balance in decentralized settings, and find ways to align the private sector to consolidate all health resources to achieve universal health coverage. These are health systems that will make us move away from vertical siloed approaches, from multiple transactions based on individuals that send stakeholders in the health sector in a comforting, because at least we feel that we're doing something, but inefficient flurry of busyness and activities. One way that we are looking at to improve efficiency and be more effective is to work with institutions more than with individuals, to transact based on bigger pieces of work rather than smaller portions. Beyond the usual regular transfer of resources or knowledge, we look for health system support that would strengthen our institutional capacities over a defined longer period, rather than one-time events to make the necessary reforms possible and sustainable. In tangible terms, these are the extra pairs of hands, expert hands, that will partner with us and toil with us as we implement what we've learned from meetings like this. These are longer-term partnerships that improve health systems, research and management capacities in our institutions. These are opportunities that make possible succession planning within the Department of Health that must have continued capacity to support UHC 2030 over several medium terms. Our development partners can help in the interim to fund such institutional partnerships and collaborations, as government will have to take time to develop procedures to work out the support relationships between institutions, beyond national borders. Thank you very much for all the knowledge shared in the past 2 days, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Richard. It's unfortunate that my two previous speakers spoke from here. I thought I was going to hide behind that lantern over there. Now I'm exposed. Thank you. For us in South Africa, the lessons learned towards health system reform for universal health coverage are very difficult lessons. We have got to reform the health system on top of what we thought we were reforming when we became a democracy only 22 years ago. Everybody knows that South Africa was an apartheid state before 22 years ago when Nelson Mandela became our first democratically elected president. At the time he took over, we had 14 different health systems in South Africa, depending on the color of your skin and your ethnicity. We had one health system for white people, one for Indian people, one for colored people, one for African people, and one for each of the 10 ethnic groups, each one of them with a minister and policies and laws. That's where we started 22 years ago. Our democratic constitution, which is now regarded as one of the best in the world, abolished that in 1996 when Nelson Mandela signed into law the first democratic constitution for a democratic South Africa, which abolished all this and allowed us to have one clear health system for the country. Unfortunately, as I'm speaking to you, we woke up to discover that we don't have one, but we have got two health systems, which are no longer divided in terms of the color of your skin or your ethnicity, but this time in terms of the depth of your pocket. We have got the public health system in South Africa that caters for 84% of the population, and a private health sector which caters for 16% of the population. There's nothing wrong in having a public and private health sector. What is wrong, clearly wrong, and I'm not about to apologize for that, is the deep inequity that resulted from this system. The deep inequity such that at the moment in South Africa, we are spending 8.5% of the GDP on health. That, from my check, is more or less what an average European country is spending on health. But we're doing so without any results, because in that 8.5%, 4.4% goes to only 16% of the population, and only the remaining 4.1% goes to 84% of the population. So the biggest resistance towards universal health coverage in South Africa is to change that inequality. That's going to be the biggest battle. And I've got cause to believe that, like United States of America, when President Obama introduced affordable health care, which came to be known as Obamacare, there was a big court case. We are actually preparing for that in South Africa. There are very powerful forces who are determined that this state of affairs mustn't change, and they are preparing for a constitutional court case. The only good thing is that our Constitution of 1996 recognizes healthcare as a right. And we are hoping that that part of the Constitution will help us. But in reforming health, we have got to reform that which I've already mentioned. Coming to strengthening health system with the help of development partners. We in 2011, following from the Paris Declaration, we took initiative of developing what we call aid effectiveness framework, whereby we come together with all the development partners to align their work so that we don't get told by development partners, no matter how powerful they are, what money they are giving us for. but we'll tell them that if they want to give us money, what should they give it for? And for that reason, without being arrogant, we formed a forum with ambassadors or high commissioner. And that forum meets annually, where we sit with all our development partners to share who is contributing money for what, and who should not maybe follow the similar example, or who should follow a particular route, so that together the development partners can enhance rather than subtract each other. And since it started working, we are very proud of that aid effectiveness framework. It works very well. There is a lot of harmony, and we have shared our strategy on universal health coverage, which we call NHI, in South Africa with all our development partners. I was told by ambassadors in one of these forums, when I was complaining bitterly about resistance from people who are interested in stopping NHI, they informed me that it happened in every country. I'm not sure what is the experience of other countries here, that when you come to universal health coverage, there will always be forces who try to resist. Now, we in South Africa are very much determined to be part of UHC 2030. We are not about to move back, court case or no court case. What we think should happen, not only in South Africa but around the whole world, is to form a big movement like the one that was formed to fight HIV and AIDS. We had very effective civil society organizations in South Africa and all over the world, which made the world to arrive where it is in the fight against HIV and AIDS. And I think we need that type of a movement, apart from the support we get from organizations like WHO and the World Bank. Without such a movement, countries like ours, where we have got such entrenched interest, and a very deep entrenched interest, it's not going to be able to shake the people who do not want any change. Maybe lastly, I should say, which is not a very safe statement I'm going to say, because nobody ever utters a statement that there is enough money in their country. But I should dare say, for universal health coverage to take root in South Africa, I think we do have enough. Only that is divided wrongly. As I have already said, spending 8.5% of the GDP on health is not a small thing. So it means it's already there. But it's not available for people who need it the most. Our universal health coverage will be fighting towards that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen and colleagues, let me say once again how very happy I am to be here for the past 2 days and the many lessons that I'm taking back with me as I return towards the end of the week. We may want to begin with lessons that we learned from the just ended MDGs and recognize that those goals that we were able to achieve, especially in the low middle income countries, were so achieved because of the strong interlinkages by sectors. And that is what we want to recommend again going forward. Sorry. Definitely, when we talk of UHC, universal, and that puts, I don't think definitely that this is the context to convince anyone about its importance. I think we accept it from here. But we need to bring others who are not in this room to share same, because we cannot implement them by ourselves. And that is why we need to mobilize everyone to come forward in sharing this very, very universal, necessary, even though ambitious, but insofar as leaving no one behind in terms of health, this is a fundamental, it has to be a given, and we need to work to achieve it. Specifically, we need to strengthen and improve our healthcare systems and create people-centered health services and ensure financial risk protection. We need to expand our ever-changing needs of the health sector and include emergency, pandemic preparedness, and so on. Our recent history attests to that. The key focus of my presentation will be on engagement and information sharing and strategy sharing. I'm talking specifically about making governments accountable, and definitely we have to do that. We need to make governments truly accountable in enhancing and sustaining UHC, and this is possible when we have engaged all arms of government in admitting and understanding the political, social, and economic gains of investing and sustaining UHC. Each arm of government needs to come on board to support the conclusions and recommendations that definitely will roll out by the end of our meeting. Ghana has a national health insurance policy. We have a VAT percentage that goes towards its sustenance, but this is apart from direct government input. The VAT percentage is not used for emolument, it's not used for training or supplies and so on. It is used to assist patients in accessing healthcare in terms of consultation, in terms of diagnosis, in terms of lab, and in terms of medications. A good step is for everyone to be transparent and accountable. And when I talk of everyone, I'm referring to everybody who plays a role in healthcare delivery, and especially in UHC. All documents definitely will have to be shared. And this includes documents that speak about the concept itself of the intervention, the rationale behind it. We need to know the budget, the finances, the disbursement plans, performance indicators, personnel working in this area, the accountability mechanisms, and evaluation reports. We need also to clarify to whom we account. Governments must have a clear policy, clearly articulated in terms of accountability. The partners must have integrated plan. I think yesterday I had the chance to talk about an integrated approach into that kind of intervention. We need to understand donor conditions and expectations, and country office roles should be clarified and responsibilities to donors and partners also explained. The deployment of NGOs sometimes imply inadequacy of government effort, which is not to be doubted, but we also need to share achievements and results. All of these will have to be transparently displayed. An urgent need is to critically examine existing structures and modes of operation, identifying areas that can promote or impede the 2030 agenda on health generally and UHC in particular. We expect sharing of experiences of countries who have reached this path, who have traveled this path, and have either reached or are near reaching the universality of the UHC itself. We need to share strategies employed to achieve these. Who was able to do this in 15 years? What was the roadmap? In our own projections, how do we see the UHC worldwide in 2030? Where do we think we are going to be? Where are we now, country by country? Given economic strengths, what needs to change? Is it the taxation system? Is it other forms of income generation? Is it diversification of economies? How do we nurture and strengthen our economies, the economies especially of low and middle income countries that are dominated by the informal sector, in order to ensure that implementation matches the undisputed desirability of the UHC? I propose we have a roadmap for each country, explaining the steps, the human resource requirements, equipment requirements, reforms in current healthcare systems and personnel needs, training modes, financial implications of the above, and how to sustain and go beyond sustaining to improve these. This is perforce a multi-stakeholder responsibility. Governments, partners, donors, NGOs, publics, civil society, the media, patients, and many more. Each has a role to play, and each must be held to account. Good governance is critical here, and is as is transparency and assumption of responsibility on the part of each actor. We also need to have very, very clear fiscal policies and how to implement to ensure the equity that belies the very basis of UHC. Among the publics, perhaps we could emphasize those who need social protection. And here we'd like to see the centrality of the poor, of children, those who are differently abled, of girls and women. And distinguished ladies and gentlemen, this list makes the majority of the population. UHC then must place at the center these categories of the population by ensuring that nothing prevents them from seeking and accessing the benefits of universal health coverage. Definitely, to reiterate, a multi-sectoral approach is critical. The well-being of society should be placed at the center. Ministry of Health, with Ministry of Health playing a key role, but not necessarily going at it alone. Ministry of Health must necessarily partner with the Ministry of Education in terms of pre- and post-training of staff, and also in terms of ensuring the cultural aspects of healing and healthcare. The ministry must also collaborate with others, including industry, finance, law, economic planning, security, water and sanitation, and so many others, because health affects everything and everybody every time. Each of these sectors must be convinced of the importance of UHC 2030, to which Ghana commits. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to our four ministers. We've had four very clear messages there. A global fund for universal health coverage, the importance of political ambition, the vitality of a civil society movement in triggering as a catalyst for UHC, and then finally a call for stronger country accountability. Now, before I hand over to Mary Paul to close this afternoon's proceedings, it says on my instructions that I'm supposed to summarize the discussion and the key takeaways from this entire meeting, linking previous sessions with the ministerial statements. That seems impossible to do. So I'm going to try and take just a few messages that I've taken from the discussion and see if we can weave it together to make some sort of sense of it. But I want to begin with two quotes from this morning. One from Lola Dare, who asked, "Why is there no change?" And second, from our colleague from Sierra Leone, who asked, "Why are we not achieving what we aim to achieve?" Now, we've heard a lot already today about strategies, task forces, work plans, budgets, committees, consultations, compacts, and consensus documents. So there's a lot that's happening, but there's a concern amongst those in countries that there have been a lot of promises in the past and still not enough delivery. Now, Universal Health Coverage 2030, what is it going to do? If you read the documents, the promise is big. It is going to be a movement. It is going to be about accountability. It is going to be about building political momentum. It is going to be about ambition and global coordination. It is going to be about creating what our ministers called for, a proper multi-stakeholder dialogue. All of the things that our ministers called for just now are all core promises of UHC 2030. That's good. We're aligned. But in the discussion today, we've also heard some wise advice from this audience. Whatever UHC 2030 does, it's got to be about countries, not another global initiative. We've got to build buy-in from those countries, and that's going to need more work. This isn't a technical process, it has to be a political process. We can't afford to have more of the same. It's not business as usual. We do need to learn the lessons of history, what went wrong and what didn't. We mustn't build another silo that is called UHC 2030. We have to be realistic about the world as it is, not the world as we might wish it to be. And we need to be very specific about what it is we're going to do. Now, we can't ignore the context in which we're having this discussion. We're seeing international cooperation today under attack. Many of our countries are facing a period that is nothing less than a new era of isolationism. Indeed, in some countries, we're seeing universal health coverage under attack. The gains made of recent years are promised to be rolled back in the coming years. In my own country, the United Kingdom, the National Health Service is facing an acute crisis of sustainability. We don't have a clear pathway to know how we will sustain the promise of universal health coverage. At the same time, we are seeing massive movements of people, both within countries and between countries. Terrible humanitarian emergencies. How does the promise of universal health coverage speak to those peoples facing such deprivation, such urgent crisis? And we are seeing a transition of leadership. Let me put it at the most optimistic. A transition of leadership in our international institutions, in some of our most powerful countries. And that transition brings a new moment of uncertainty that we can least afford. So what does our discussion tell us that we need to do? First, when we talk about universal health coverage, what do we mean by that? A first concrete step must be to renew our commitment to primary health care. Building a primary health care system in countries is a first step. Now, what are the elements of a primary health care system? And I want to just focus on two. First, people. In the next 2 days, the Commission on Health, Employment and Economic Growth, which was launched at the UN General Assembly in September this year, will have its first ministerial follow-up meeting here in Geneva. A critical moment to take the commitment of 194 member states and begin to translate it into action, to populate our primary healthcare systems with health workers who can deliver on the promise of universal health coverage. Second, and we haven't talked much about it today, the importance of essential medicines. They were called pharmaceuticals earlier, but I want to call them essential medicines. Now, a basic package of something like 200 or so essential medicines costs, at a minimum, about $13 US dollars per capita. But most low-income countries and almost half of middle-income countries spend substantially less than $13 per capita on essential medicines. That means that most of the world has no access whatsoever to that basket of essential medicines. Essential medicines plus people are absolutely critical foundations for building that primary healthcare system. And a fourth concrete action that we need is fresh leadership. I've spent a lot of recent years working in women's and children's health, and we've been so lucky The President of Tanzania, President Kikwete, led on accountability. The President of Nigeria, Goodluck Jonathan, led on life-saving commodities. The Prime Minister of Canada, Stephen Harper, led on financing through his Muskoka initiative. We need heads of state to lead for us. We have some. Shinzo Abe, Prime Minister Abe from Japan, has made a fantastic step forward in making universal health coverage part of his foreign policy, but we need more. And we also need to think cautiously about our next steps and realize, again, the wider context. Progress to universal health coverage, and Minister Motsoaledi put it most eloquently, is not a linear technical story. Progress to universal health coverage is a historical story, a national historical story. The National Health Service in the UK, born in 1948. Japan, achieving universal health coverage in 1961 after post-war reconstruction. In South Africa, part of its liberation history. So we need to look not just at the technical and the linear, but for particular historical moments and opportunities that we can seize. Universal health coverage isn't only a national story, but it's also a social contract between government and people. And that social contract is unfortunately always under threat and unstable. Under threat by new political forces that emerge, under threat by epidemics that we didn't expect. The lesson here is to be always on our guard, never complacent about how we protect that national story. And there's also a missing element in all of our discussion today, because when we build that national story and we seek to protect it, we have to create the conditions for a national conversation so that everybody has a stake in that story. Critical to that conversation is the role that the media plays. The media mediates between government and people, between private sector and public sector, between civil society and academia, between parliaments and the whole of society. A vigorous media can promote that national conversation and create the demand by the people for universal health coverage. We need to pay much greater attention to the way we support the media and support communication about these issues. So finally, we do need to ask at the end of today, what is the value add of Universal Health Coverage 2030? We need quick wins to demonstrate its value. And one quick win that we can certainly call for is being seen to be fully on the side of countries. When countries ask for help and no one listens or steps forward to help, as our colleague from Sierra Leone pointed out this morning, Universal Health Coverage 2030 must speak out. If UHC 2030 is unable to fulfill a fundamental role of accountability, it will not be credible, it will not be respected, and it will be ignored. The promise of UHC 2030 is big, it's ambitious, and it has the potential to be transformational. Let's make sure we deliver on that promise. Marie-Paule.
Thank you very much, Richard. And of course, you know, adding to the problem of universal health coverage in the UK, I can say that one of the prominent candidates for president in France is discussing that everything except long-term care should go out to private insurance. So I don't even know what another candidate who's more of a fascist side might propose. But let's see. Not everything turned to the bad. But a lot of things turn to the bad these days. But, you know, there are ups and downs. And I hope that we'll go to a much better period for universal health coverage, for peace and prosperity. So I'm coming here to thank you very much, all of you, for your active contribution and participation to this meeting. Indeed, it is clear that we see the momentum coming up for a collaboration, intersectoral collaboration, South-South collaboration, collaboration with public and private, on health system strengthening for UHC countries, UHC coverage in countries. So this is fantastic, and we need to act with ambition. There is no other way than acting with ambition. So if I may, I would like to invite Ms. Nathalie Paroli-Otin from the Rockefeller Foundation, who will be coming with an announcement.
So thank you, Dr. Kearney, for this opportunity. Honorable ministers, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to read a short statement on behalf of Dr. Judith Rodin, president of the Rockefeller Foundation. The Rockefeller Foundation's mission, unchanged since 1913, is to promote the well-being of humanity throughout the world. Today, we pursue this mission by advancing inclusive economies and building resilience that helps people, communities, and institutions prepare for, withstand, and emerge from acute and chronic stresses. In 2009, the Rockefeller Foundation launched the Joint Learning Network to connect practitioners and policymakers on the front lines of health reform. We supported the 2010 WHO report focused on health financing for UHC, and 2 years after that, in 2012, we partnered with global leaders and civil society to ensure the passage of the landmark UN resolution unanimously endorsing universal health coverage as a priority for every country. In 2014, on the anniversary of that resolution, the Foundation launched the first ever Universal Health Coverage Day to give us all a platform to call for stronger, more equitable health systems that saves lives, drive economic growth, and create more resilient communities. We also helped establish the Universal Health Coverage Coalition, which today comprises 844 organizations in 117 countries. The inclusion of universal health coverage as a target in the Sustainable Development Goals last year was a tremendous victory for this community. But the work is far from done. So what next? On the third Universal Health Coverage Day, the Rockefeller Foundation is proud to announce a nearly $1.5 million commitment to the International Health Partnership for UHC 2030, a vital new initiative to drive our collective vision for health for all. This commitment aims to ensure that the promises the world leaders have made are matched by equally ambitious actions. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much to the Rockefeller Foundation. This is clearly a very good news for us in order to continue the development of UHC 2030. So what's next? There was a lot of discussion of the consensus paper, and we are very happy that you agree that we have this paper is based on consistent principle with the Global Compact. We heard your feedback from today, and the consultation will continue with UHC 2030 signatories, with different constituency, related initiative, and finally will go to the G20 Health Ministers meeting, and this will happen from January to May 2017. Following this, we hope that UHC 2030 will have a role in the dissemination and use of the content of this consensus paper. Another next step is that we will continue to work together for health system strengthening under the UHC 2030 umbrella. So at the strategic level, so that your priorities are heard, at operational level for harmonizing approaches, learning and exchange, and finally at the secretarial level with the World Bank and WHO to put together regular information exchange and collaborative planning and so on. So we need to do things differently, and as Dr. Viroj was saying, to align at country level in support of inside-out reform. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, beyond systems, we need to think of people. Thank you very much. And the meeting is closed.